Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're going to check out the new releases from Lamb of God, Queensrÿche, Wednesday 13, and Goatwhore. So, a lot of albums dropped today that we're taking a look at, and I guess I'll start with the first one that I listened to, which was Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven by Goatwhore.
What an album title.
Amazing album title. That sounds awesome. Album art is pretty cool as well. Now, the only time I've ever really listened to Goatwhore was back when, and I guess this is the second time I bring this up, when we were holding the Best Metal Band of the World tournament. Goatwhore is in there, and I was checking them out. They lost their round one to Metallica, and I thought they were pretty cool. I liked the riffs I was hearing. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And I remember you telling me at that time, like, Goatwhore, kind of like, what you heard from this song is pretty much generally what they sound like overall with their music. So that's kind of what I had in my head going into this album. And I didn't get really to have a 100% focused listen on this album. However, perhaps that could have been to a benefit because I felt that this album is perfect as background music. At least from what I was hearing. I'm like, yeah, it sounds pretty cool. And then I focus on it a little bit. Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool riff. And then I go do something else. So it kind of worked out that way. However, From Victory is the Lightning of Destruction. Sick song title, by the way. The names are good. Really good riff in that song, and from there onward, I felt like the album was really picking up and starting to catch my ear a bit more like, ooh, that's good, that's good, that's good. So I was thinking to myself, well, I think this album definitely might have some depth, and I'll definitely have to listen more to find that depth, because I think it might be there, just based on that second half.
Yeah, you know what? I agree on a lot of those things. I got into Goatwhore a bunch of years ago. It's a band that I like a lot, but I don't love them. I feel like they're really good at what they do. I feel like I could put them on any time and enjoy listening to them. But there's something lacking about this band that just prevents me from loving them, prevents me from really caring about them. And I think it's just like a slight lack of diversity in their music. A lot of their songs do sound kind of samey. Even though they do kind of mesh a lot of genres together, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard to even put them in a genre. Like, if you try to look up the genre for this band, you're going to find 5 or 6 different things, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds like all of those, like, all the time.
They're kind of like just one big concoction of a few genres together.
It is. Which, and when you think about that, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of diversity in their music, but it all just sounds like just Goatwhore, which is not a bad thing, but it just, sometimes you just want a little more. Victory is the Lightning of Destruction, which TV Fish just mentioned, was the highlight of the album for me as well. This song is the track number 7 out of, I think, 10? I can't remember exactly.
10 or
12.
12.
I think it's 12.
Okay, 12.
It just rips. Like, and all the songs rip. It's fucking Goatwhore. But this song specifically, I thought was a standout track for sure. But overall, cover to cover, I thought it was a fun album. I enjoyed it. I would like to give it more time. But on to the next one. I'm going to pass the floor to you. Let's talk about Queensrÿche.
Queensrÿche, Digital Noise Alliance. Now, this is another band I haven't listened to much. We've covered them once on the channel before, and that's when we reacted to Eyes of a Stranger, which we both thought was pretty good, but that is classic Queensrÿche. They have gone under a little bit of a lineup change, different singer, and this album is with that different singer. Speaking of the singer, Todd Latour was the highlight of this album. His voice sounded fantastic, such a big range, so powerful. I'm listening to this album, like, just getting an awesome kind of, like, old school heavy metal kind of vibe from that.
For sure.
And I loved it. I'm like, yeah, this is cool, this is powerful, there's dynamics, there's range to it. I like the clarity of the mix as well. You think of old bands, and you kind of by default think, okay, some of the older stuff is going to be mixed differently just because it's older, right? So I'm glad that a band such as this can still sound totally modern, despite, being from the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Queensrÿche is a band, again, I never got too into Queensrÿche either. They sound like a band that should have been part of the British New Wave heavy metal movement, but they're from America, so I always think that's odd for some reason.
But fit right in.
They fit right in with that whole sound. I feel like I have to be in the right mood to appreciate it. Okay, so I listened to the album, I thought it was good, but it's a little bit slow for me. It's a little bit, the songs feel too long for what they are. They're all around the 5-6 minute mark. The album's an hour long, which is not grotesquely long, but
decently long.
Yeah, like when you get used to listening to albums that are 40 minutes, which is generally like average these
40
days.
40 to 45, yeah.
Yeah, so an hour-long album with songs that don't have a lot of energy to them feels really
you know what?
It's slow,
I can
it's
agree
slow.
on that. The album is a little bit long for what it is.
exactly. So when you go from Goatwhore, Lamb of God type of stuff, and then you listen to Queensrÿche, and it's like that, it feels like it feels boring. It just it's not. But I feel like if I was in the right mood and had a proper time to give it a good, solid, better chance. I feel like there's a lot here, and as Choirgiant mentioned, the vocals are good, there's some good guitar riffs, there's some good solos. I mean, this band's been around for a long time for a reason. They're not some no-name band out of nowhere, so they got some good stuff there. I thought the album was pretty good. I was just a little bored with it. To cap it off, though, they have a pretty good cover of Rebel Yell at the end of the album, which I thought was really well done. So I thought that was good, too. That was I applaud that.
Yeah, it was a neat cover. So, Horrifier by Wednesday 13. What did you think?
Okay, so again, another artist I have minimal exposure to. I've listened to them before. I listened to Murder Dolls when Murder Dolls first dropped. That was a big thing for me back then because Joey and Slipknot, that whole connection. Never really loved them. I never really was a huge fan of Wednesday 13 and his style of music and his aesthetic and all that stuff. But I think he's pretty cool. What was it? Maybe a month ago he dropped a single for Insides Out.
I don't know if it was a month ago. I think we watched it quite recently.
Whatever it was. When Insides Out came out,
we did check it out.
I thought this song was awesome. I said, holy crap, Wednesday 13 is getting heavier. They're getting more metal, not as much as that kind of pop horror kind of sound that he always had. But this song was pretty much the only song on the album like that. And this song, although I thought it was really cool, did start getting kind of repetitive pretty fast because the riff kind of repeats a lot. And I listened to it a couple times and I was like, okay, I'm kind of over it already, which is not that good. But the rest of the album, I mean, I don't hate it, it's not bad, but it just is not the kind of metal that I like too much. So I don't really want to talk bad about it, it's just not quite for me, but it's still fun.
As someone who's honestly never listened to Wednesday 13 before we checked out Insides Out, I didn't really have much of a reference point, right? So I came into this with a completely open mind, and I liked it quite a bit. I thought the riffs were cool. It had lots of different vibes with different songs, and I feel like it gave you different feelings for different points of the album. It didn't really sound like, okay, it's just kind of going with one thing here, different sounds. Insides Out, really good song. Exhume and Devour, though, kind of put this, I guess, idea in my head that, okay, this sounds like Rob Zombie, but I guess less cheesy. Because Rob Zombie is cool and has a similar sound to this, but sometimes there's a little bit of like cheesy stuff, whatever. Not that that's a problem, that's just...
Thematically, they're both very similar.
Thematically, yes, for sure. The horror, kind of spooky, kind of theme that both bands have 100%. Sound-wise, with the music, that's just what I was kind of thinking. I'm like, oh, this is reminding me a little bit of Rob Zombie, which is neat.
Yeah.
But I also like the album's pacing as well. I feel like it does a good job of kind of taking you on that album journey and not feeling like, oh, I'm hearing the same song 10 times or whatever. It kind of gives you a different experience as you go through it, and I thought it was pretty fun.
True. So the last one of the day, Omens by Lamb of God. I'll let you take the floor.
Well, I mean, we did react to the title track, and we were quite critical. I'm going to be completely honest. There were multiple times leading to this album's release that I forgot it was coming out.
Yeah.
Because I was, my expectations were very low. The singles I was not feeling, and I was curious as to why. I'm like, what is going on? What is happening to Lamb of God?
The singles killed our hype.
The album wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I was expecting this to be like, I don't care, this sucks. I'm like, you know what? To really sum up what this album is, based on just hearing it once, it's a Lamb of God album. If you like what Lamb of God does, sure you'll like this album, because Lamb of God did Lamb of God. My issue comes from the fact that not many of the songs really stand out as anything super interesting or cool. When their self-titled album came out a few years ago, which got 2 toe tags, by the way, fantastic album. The reason, at least for myself, to feel that it's fantastic is because they did so many things that stand out in the songs. There's so many moments where it's like, oh, that's cool. Oh, this song has that part. Yep. There's a feature on this one. There's so many things in that album that could stand out to you as great songs.
Yeah.
This album, for the most part, felt like, okay, it's a Lamb of God song. They do Lamb of God things. There wasn't really much that just felt interesting. It was just very straight up and straightforward. However, it wasn't in a bad regard. It's not like they did a bad job on the songs. It's just that the songs feel just uninspired. Or, you know, so it's just like, it's fine. It's Lamb of God. It's what it is. There are a few tracks that I kind of thought were interesting. Nevermore was not as bad as I originally felt. I believe I think that might have been the first single.
Maybe.
And I listened to that, I'm like, you know what? Okay, this song's not as bad as I remember. Ditch is a good one. I like that one. That one, it kind of hits that vibe of Lamb of God that makes you think, ooh, this is dirty, this is good. September Song is also pretty cool, a nice closer, and it changes the pace. It actually sounds different, and it is a song that stands out because it sounds interesting. If there were more songs that not sounded like September Song, but gave just the kind of impression that September Song gave. Maybe not impression, but was interesting like that. That made me think, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. Not enough songs did that for me, for this record. What do you think?
I want to say I have mixed feelings about this album. Blah, blah, blah. I'll give you some thoughtful insight. But this is the mixed feelings. I'm a Lamb of God fan, but I don't like this album. This band's going downhill for me. Even though their last album did get 2 toe tags, when these singles came out, I was so disappointed. I'm like, this is not what I want from this band. It sounds like Lamb of God. It's a weird thing. Because like TV Fish said, it sounds like Lamb of God doing what Lamb of God does, but it sounds so cookie cutter. And I feel like there's no innovation, there's no experimentation, there's a severe lack of creative spark on this album. And I feel like it shows, and it sounds like Lamb of God rushing to make an album to meet a contractual deadline. And I've said this before about albums, and I'm probably wrong, maybe I'm not wrong, I don't know. But I feel like some bands, they're all under contract with their labels and stuff, and they have to produce a certain amount of albums within a certain amount of years, and maybe the label's like, hey, your time's coming up, you gotta get an album out before the end of the year. So they go, oh fuck, let's fucking throw 10 songs together. That's what this sounds like to me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they put their heads down and they were in the studio together night after night, grueling hours, thinking things, rewriting things. But the best name you can come up for the album was Omens? Like, that sounds like something a teenager would write. Like, I just feel like the creativity for a band like Lamb of God, a headline festival or festival headlining band that sells out stadiums around the world and has been doing this for the last 20, 30 years, like since the early 90s, maybe late 80s, whatever. It's unacceptable, in my opinion, to be writing stuff that sounds this bland. It's one of those bands you gotta hold to a higher standard, I feel like. And for this one, they really missed the mark for me. If I spent more time with it, maybe I'll fall in love with it. I have no idea. There was one standout track, and that was track number 9, Denial Mechanism. And it just was a cool sounding song. There's nothing specific that happened. It was kind of a little thrashier than the other songs.
It kind of hits that Lamb of God mark that you would enjoy with like Lamb of God when they're at their best.
I think the biggest thing about that song is that it had a bit of a different flavor than the other songs. So I finally went, okay, here's something that doesn't sound just like bleh, like they just vomited on the music notes. But whatever. I think we got to make a decision on what we're going to review this week. And we talked about this before we started this video. Most people would probably want us to do Lamb of God. It's probably going to pull in the most views. They're way more popular than any other band on this list. But we are going to do Goatwhore this week for a couple reasons. Number one, we both enjoyed it slightly more than we did Lamb of God on our first impressions. And number two, we've never covered Goatwhore on this channel before, and we've covered Lamb of God several times. So, Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven is going to get our attention for an entire week. And we'll be back next week to give you guys our full and final review of this album by Goatwhore. So leave your thoughts down below and let us know what you guys think of all 4 of these brand new albums that just dropped. But that's it from us for now. Be sure to subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm Vile Self.
I'm TV Fish.
See you guys on the next one.